What if the Philippines went to war with China, a small archipelago of more than 7,000 islands standing against the world's most powerful rising superpower? It sounds impossible. It sounds terrifying. But imagine for a moment that it actually happened. The spark would almost certainly be the South China Sea. That vast stretch of water where reefs and islands are claimed by both sides. China building artificial islands bristling with weapons. The Philippines holding on to its rights under international law. Tensions already high. A single clash between ships or a downed aircraft could ignite the fire if war broke out. The first thing the world would see is China's overwhelming power. China has the largest navy in the world, more ships than even the United States destroyers. Frigates, submarines, aircraft carriers, all pointing south toward the Philippines. The Philippine Navy, by comparison, is tiny. A handful of frigates, a few older vessels and coastal defense systems. It would look like David facing Goliath, but the story does not end there because the Philippines has something. China does not allies. The United States, bound by the Mutual Defense Treaty, would be pulled into the conflict. American bases in Guam, Japan, and even within the Philippines itself could launch aircraft and warships to protect Manila. The skies above the South China Sea would fill with American fighter jets, clashing with Chinese planes, missiles streaking across the horizon. The war would not stay at sea alone. The Philippine Islands themselves would be in danger. Chinese missiles could strike air bases, ports, and even cities. But Filipinos are no strangers to hardship. History has shown their resilience from the revolution against Spain to the brutal years of World War II. Filipinos know how to resist the war. It would not just be fought with ships and planes, it would be fought with guerrilla tactics on the ground. Fishermen turning into scouts, villagers hiding soldiers in the jungles. The Philippines has rugged terrain perfect for resistance, and that is where China would face its greatest nightmare. An occupied Philippines would be impossible to control. Every town, every mountain, every island would become a battlefield where Filipino fighters supported by allies could bleed the enemy dry, but the cost would be unimaginable. Thousands of lives lost, cities destroyed, the economy shattered. China might attempt a quick and overwhelming strike, hoping to force the Philippines into surrender. But the longer the war dragged on, the more dangerous it would become. Because it would not just be the Philippines and China soon. Other nations would be dragged in. Japan has its own disputes with China and would not stand by quietly. Australia, too, has pledged to support the Philippines and the United States. European powers might send support ships and aid. Even India could step in, fearing China's growing dominance. The war that began in the South China Sea could spiral into a regional conflict, or even a global one. Imagine shipping routes, blocked oil tankers unable to move. The world economy would crash. Prices would skyrocket. Countries everywhere would feel the pain, and yet the Philippines would remain at the center, fighting for survival. The skies over Manila would light up with anti-aircraft fire sirens echoing through the streets. Soldiers deployed along the coasts. Every Filipino forced to adapt. Children, evacuated families separated. The war would test the very soul of the nation, but it would also reveal something powerful. The unity of a people who refuse to bow down. History has proven that even when facing impossible odds, Filipinos do not break. During World War II, they fought side by side with Americans. And even when Bataan and Corregidor fell, the resistance continued in the jungles until liberation. The same spirit would rise again if China tried to conquer the Philippines. But make no mistake, the destruction would be immense. Ports like Subic and Manila Bay would be prime targets. Airports like Clark and Cebu would face missile strikes. Industries would collapse. The seas would be littered with wreckage from both sides, and innocent civilians would pay the highest price. And yet, one of the biggest weapons the Philippines has is not military, but political. The image of a small democratic nation being attacked by a giant authoritarian power would rally the world. Sympathy, aid, and support would pour in. Social media would explode. Global protests would pressure leaders to act. And suddenly China would not just be fighting the Philippines, but the entire weight of global opinion. The question is, could China win quickly, or would it be dragged into a long, grinding war? The answer depends on how far the Philippines and its allies are willing to fight. If America throws its full weight into the war, it could change the balance completely. U.S. carriers cruising in the Philippine Sea, bombers launching from Guam, submarines lurking beneath the waves striking Chinese ships. It would no longer be a small war. It would be a superpower showdown. And that is the terrifying truth, because a war between the Philippines and China is not just about two countries. It is about the possibility of World War III nuclear weapons hanging like a shadow over the entire conflict. One wrong move and the unthinkable could happen. Yet through all of this, one thing is clear. The Philippines would not go quietly. Filipinos are survivors known for their bravery abroad and at home. Every nurse, every worker, every soldier carries the spirit of sacrifice. If the nation were threatened, that spirit would ignite. Once again, the streets would fill with volunteers. The diaspora of millions of Filipinos overseas would rally, sending money supplies and even fighting for their homeland. The war would not just be fought on the islands, but in hearts around the world. Imagine a nurse in London, a sailor in Dubai, a student in Canada, all sending support back home. The Filipino identity stronger than ever before. And in the end, whether the Philippines stood victorious or defeated, one thing would remain. The world would never forget the bravery of a small nation that stood up against a giant and forced the world to choose sides. The forgotten islands of the Pacific would suddenly become the center of global history, a place where freedom was tested and sacrifice measured. The question of what if the Philippines went to war with China is not just a military scenario. It is a warning, a glimpse into how fragile peace really is, and how the courage of one small nation could shake the world to its core.